Continuing with the remaining sections of the motivational script outlined for Stop Explaining Yourself to Demons and People, sections 11 to 1611. Not everyone deserves front row access. Think about your life like a theater. Not everyone deserves front row seats. Some people are only here to criticize the performance, not to applaud your growth. They never paid the price of loyalty. They never earned the right to stay close. But you keep letting them in. Keep explaining, justifying, pleading for understanding. Why? Because you forgot your value. You forgot that your story isn't for casual listeners. Your vulnerability isn't free admission. It's sacred. It's earned. From now on, move some people to the balcony, or out of the theater completely. You can still love them. But love doesn't mean explaining yourself endlessly. Some connections are meant to be distant, and that distance will heal you more than any conversation ever could. 12. They hear you. They just don't care. Let's break the illusion. You think they didn't hear you, that if you just say it better, with more emotion, they'll finally understand. But here's the truth. They heard you the first time. They understood more than you realize. They just don't care. And that's the part that hurts. We expect that when people understand us, they'll respect us. But some people understand you clearly and still choose cruelty. That's not your failure. That's their nature. You're not here to beg for basic decency. You're not here to decode coldness. When someone shows you they don't care, don't argue. Don't explain. Just exit. The people who care will prove it with action, not confusion. 13. Peace is more valuable than closure. We chase closure like it's gold, like we need it to move on. But closure is a myth when you're dealing with people who never planned to give you peace. You think that one more talk will fix it, that if they could just say sorry or admit they were wrong, it'll all make sense. But they won't. And even if they did, would it really heal you? Or would it open more wounds? Peace isn't found in their apology. It's found in your decision to stop needing it. Closure is just clarity plus acceptance. You already have the clarity. They showed you who they are. Now comes the hard part, accepting it without explanation. That's real power. That's peace. 14. You can't heal in the same room that broke you. You keep going back to the same conversations, the same people, the same emotional battlefield, hoping this time they'll be different, that this time they'll listen. But how can you heal in the same room that broke you? You need distance. You need air. You need silence to hear your own wisdom again. Healing doesn't happen through more pain. It happens through new patterns, new spaces, new energy. Walk away, not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to choose peace over chaos. That space you're afraid to create, that's where the healing begins. You don't have to explain why you left. Just leave, quietly, powerfully. 15. The liberation of not needing to be understood. Imagine the freedom of not needing to be understood, not needing to explain your dreams, your values, your journey. Imagine waking up and living for you, not for their validation. That's not selfish. That's liberation. You weren't born to convince people. You were born to evolve, to rise, to shed layers. And sometimes that means walking alone. But walking alone with clarity is better than walking with a crowd in confusion. Your life will confuse small minds. Let it. Your boundaries will offend broken people. Let them. You are not for everyone. That's your strength, not your flaw. Be misunderstood and be free. 16. Rise and reclaim your power. This is your moment. Not to get louder, but to get clearer. Not to explain yourself, but to embody your truth. You've spent years trying to earn love from people who only loved control. You've wasted your fire on cold hearts. But that ends now. You rise, not in rage, but in clarity. You speak less. You move with purpose. You stop explaining your soul to those who distort it. You were never meant to beg for respect. You were meant to own your space, to walk with power. From this moment forward, you protect your energy. You honor your journey. You reclaim your voice, not for them, but for you. The demons and people only win when you shrink. So stop explaining and start rising. Let me know if you'd like this formatted into a full-length script for production, broken into voiceover timing, or combined with music emotion cues for editing. Have you ever wondered why you feel so exhausted after trying to explain yourself to someone who clearly doesn't want to understand you? That tightness in your chest, that frustration in your voice, that hollow silence after you walk away. It's not just about the conversation. It's about the deeper ache of not being seen. Not truly. You give your heart, your words, your reasons, hoping they'll hear the truth behind your voice. But instead, they twist it. They mock it. Or worse, they ignore it like it was never said at all. And you leave that moment feeling smaller than before, questioning your own clarity, doubting your intentions, even when you know you were coming from a place of honesty. This isn't a one-time feeling. It's become a pattern. You give, they drain. You explain, they dismiss. And inside, a part of you keeps hoping maybe this time it will be different. But it never is it? Because some people don't want clarity. They want control. They don't want your truth. They want your silence. And when you keep showing up to those conversations, trying to justify your heart, you're not fixing anything. You're feeding a cycle that was never meant to be healed, only escaped. You see, not everyone you meet is fighting the same battles you are. Some people have already lost their war within, and now they're trying to drag others into their chaos. Their wounds speak louder than their words. Their pain wears the face of sarcasm, blame, and manipulation, but that's not yours to carry. You weren't born to explain your light to those who choose darkness. You weren't meant to plead for compassion from those who feel threatened by your strength. That weight you feel isn't because you failed. It's because you've been standing in a space that was never meant to hold you. And here's the truth they'll never tell you. You're not hard to love. You're not confusing. You're not broken. You're just trying to be real in a world that rewards masks. But you don't have to keep breaking yourself to be understood. There's another way, a way of peace, strength, and quiet power. You'll learn how to stop handing your soul to people who've done nothing to earn it. You'll understand how to draw a line without apology. And most importantly, you'll find the courage to stop explaining yourself to demons and people. This message is more than words. It's a mirror. It's a wake-up call. And if you feel it in your chest right now, that's your spirit remembering who you really are. So don't look away. Don't shrink back. Stay with this. Because by the end, you'll no longer feel the need to be understood by those who only want to misunderstand you. You'll finally feel free. And that feeling? That's where everything changes. You've been taught that if you're kind enough, patient enough, open enough, people will eventually understand you. That if you just keep explaining, they'll get it. They'll see your heart, recognize your intentions, and finally treat you with the respect you deserve. But that's the lie. That's the emotional trap. Because some people don't want to understand you. They only pretend not to get it, so you'll keep bending, keep giving, keep proving. And the more you try to be understood, the more power you hand them. They don't need answers. They need control. Your explanations become their fuel. Your vulnerability becomes their leverage. And slowly, without realizing it, you become a performer in their game, trying to win approval from someone who has no intention of ever offering it. This isn't empathy anymore. It's self-betrayal. It's what happens when your heart keeps extending beyond your boundaries. You're trying to heal what was never yours to fix. You're trying to love someone into awareness, into decency, into clarity. But they've already chosen confusion. They live in it. They hide in it. They use it to avoid the truth staring them in the face. And that truth is you. You've become a mirror, and they can't stand what they see. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence exposes everything they've refused to confront. You reflect strength, integrity, growth, and instead of being inspired, they choose to attack. They'd rather drag you down than rise to meet you. And that has nothing to do with your worth. You're not the problem. You're the spark they tried to extinguish. And the more you explain yourself to them, the more you dim that light. Every time you defend your heart to someone committed to misunderstanding it, you teach your nervous system that your truth isn't safe, that your feelings need permission, that your worth is negotiable. But none of that is true. You don't need to explain yourself to people who weaponize your words. You don't owe clarity to those who respond with chaos. You don't have to make your soul small so they feel less insecure around you. The people who genuinely care won't need paragraphs to understand your silence. They'll feel it, they'll respect it. But the ones who don't, they'll demand more, only to discard what you give. That's why your peace has to come from within, not from being understood, but from being true to yourself, even when that truth offends people who are used to the old, smaller version of you. It's time to stop giving access to those who misuse it. Time to stop pouring into hands that only know how to squeeze. There's freedom waiting for you, not in their validation, not in their changed behavior, but in your decision to no longer explain yourself to people who twist your truth into something ugly. You're not here to be decoded. You're here to be whole. And wholeness begins the moment you stop seeking approval from broken mirrors. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop needing people to see your side, when you stop begging them to understand, to empathize, to validate the pain they caused. At first it feels like silence, like giving up, but it's not. It's the beginning of reclaiming your power. Because the moment you stop trying to be understood by the wrong people, you start building something far greater, self-respect. The need to explain yourself is rooted in an old wound, the fear of being unseen. You learn that if people don't agree with you, maybe you're wrong. If they walk away, maybe you're unworthy. If they don't respond with kindness, maybe you caused it. But those are lies your past taught you, and it's time to unlearn them. You do not need a witness to your worth. You don't need a cosigner for your truth. When someone doesn't honor your boundaries, their confusion is not your burden. You're not on trial. You're not here to win a debate about who you are. You're not obligated to hand over your heart as evidence every time someone doubts your value. The need to explain yourself is often a last attempt at connection, hoping the right words will finally bridge the gap. But some gaps exist for a reason. They're not meant to be crossed. They're meant to protect you from what's on the other side. Let that sink in. You've been trying to explain your fire to people who live in the cold by choice, and every time you do, you freeze a little more. You dim just enough to make them comfortable, and slowly, you become someone even you don't recognize. That's not compassion. That's self-abandonment. Real compassion includes you. Real growth includes boundaries. And real love, real healthy love, never makes you beg to be understood. You have to stop apologizing for evolving, for seeing through the games, for standing taller than they expected. You are not here to make others feel comfortable with their own stagnation. You're here to grow, to rise, to stretch beyond the spaces where you once shrunk. And sometimes that means being misunderstood. That means walking away while they mock you, while they call you cold, difficult, selfish. Let them tell their story. But you don't have to stay in it. You are allowed to be the villain in someone else's narrative if it means being the hero in your own life. Because peace doesn't always come from being seen. It often comes from letting go of the need to be seen by the wrong eyes. You already know who you are. You already know what you feel. You don't need anyone's permission to honor it. That's the shift. That's the healing. When you finally realize that your truth is not a question mark waiting for someone else's answer, it's a full sentence, and it ends with a period, not an apology. They will call you cold when you stop explaining yourself. They'll say you've changed when you stop tolerating their patterns. They'll accuse you of being distant, detached, disloyal, not because you've become less loving, but because you've stopped being available for their dysfunction. That's what happens when you set boundaries with people who benefited from your lack of them. When you start choosing yourself, the ones who used to feed on your silence will panic. They'll twist your strength into selfishness. They'll demand the old version of you, the one who overgave, who over-explained, who overstayed in rooms that only echoed your pain. But that version of you is gone. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started healing. And healing doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it looks like saying nothing. Sometimes it looks like walking away mid-sentence, because you finally understand that not every conversation deserves your energy. This is the uncomfortable part of growth, the shedding. The moments where you realize certain people only loved you when you were easy to manipulate. When your kindness was currency they didn't have to earn. When your empathy was expected, not appreciated. Now, your silence terrifies them. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they no longer have control. You're no longer explaining yourself into exhaustion. You're no longer repeating the same truth, hoping it lands differently in ears that were never open. That shift is powerful, because you're no longer trying to win people over. You're not begging to be understood. You're choosing peace over performance. And peace, real peace, isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply becomes your new standard. It shows up when you realize that being misunderstood is far less painful than constantly abandoning yourself. It shows up when you choose not to engage, not because you're passive, but because you're done dancing with chaos. It's a quiet knowing that not every fire is yours to put out. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every question deserves an answer, especially when the question was never asked in love. You don't owe anyone a version of you that shrinks to fit their comfort zone. You're not a shapeshifter. You're not a translator for those who refuse to listen. You're not a mirror for their brokenness. You're a whole, evolving being. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Let your growth speak. Let your boundaries speak. Let your absence speak when presence is no longer respected. That's how you reclaim your energy. That's how you rebuild your soul. You'll feel guilt at first. That's normal. You've been trained to believe that silence is cruelty. But in truth, silence can be sacred. Silence can be freedom. Silence can be the loudest act of self-love you've ever chosen. And when you finally stop explaining yourself, you'll feel it. Not in their response, but in your own calm. That's when you'll know you're free. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it enters quietly, wrapped in a moment when you no longer feel the urge to prove yourself. That stillness you feel isn't emptiness, it's peace. The silence that once scared you now feels like safety. Because you've finally stopped asking people to see you clearly when they've only ever looked through the lens of their own projections. Their inability to understand you was never a reflection of your depth. It was a reflection of their limits. And now, you've stepped beyond them. You've released the burden of defending your existence to those who only ever sought to reshape it. You are not meant to shrink into their narratives. You are not designed to fit into their conditions. You are not here to audition for connection. You were never supposed to twist yourself into knots just to be accepted by people who benefit from your confusion. That confusion kept you close to them, didn't it? The questioning, the second guessing, the endless internal debate. Was it you? Were you too much? Not enough? But those questions didn't come from truth. They came from being consistently dismissed, devalued, and diminished by people who knew your power and wanted to keep you from seeing it. Now you see it. Not because someone finally affirmed it, but because you got tired of being drained. You got tired of running circles in conversations that never reached the core. You got tired of hearing your own voice trying to justify your presence. That exhaustion was a gift. It broke the spell. It snapped you out of the trance of over-explaining. Because love isn't a courtroom. Your heart is not a case to be won. And real connection doesn't demand a performance. It invites truth without punishment. When you stop explaining yourself, you take the first real breath of your life. You inhale clarity. You exhale the weight of misunderstanding. And in that breath, you remember who you were before they taught you to doubt it. You remember that your worth is not a negotiation. That your peace is not a privilege. They don't get to decide when you're allowed to feel safe inside yourself. You take back the space within your mind that was once occupied by their voices. You stop rehearsing arguments. You stop rewriting your truth to make it easier to digest. You stop apologizing for your instincts, your intuition, your emotional intelligence. This is where strength becomes unshakable. Not because you're hard or cold, but because you're rooted. You've chosen stillness over struggle, self-respect over approval, truth over performance. And in doing so, you've reclaimed the most sacred thing you own, your energy. You no longer waste it on people who listen to reply instead of to understand. You no longer give it away to those who can't meet you with the same depth. You've closed the chapter on justifying your soul, and now finally you're free to rise without permission. You are not difficult for needing clarity. You are not too intense for wanting honesty. You are not wrong for outgrowing the spaces where silence was used to avoid responsibility. The world may try to convince you that your boundaries are a problem, that your voice is too much, that your refusal to play small makes you selfish. But the truth is, your strength unsettles those who relied on your self-doubt. The moment you choose alignment over approval, you become a threat to every system that was built on your silence. They may call it attitude, they may call it arrogance, but what they're really feeling is the discomfort of no longer being able to control you. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Your peace highlights their chaos, and your refusal to explain yourself ruins the script they've rehearsed for years. They expected you to plead, to soften, to bend, but now, you're grounded. Now you're anchored in a truth they cannot shake. You're not chasing clarity from those who speak in confusion. You're not begging for understanding from those who thrive on distortion. You're choosing solitude over performance. You're choosing calm over conflict. You're choosing yourself without needing anyone's permission to do so. Let them misunderstand you. Let them build stories to justify their own discomfort. That is not your business. You are not here to manage their insecurities. You are not responsible for how they react to your healing. You're here to honor the version of you that no longer needs external validation to feel real, that no longer begs for scraps of empathy, that no longer lowers their frequency just to stay connected to the familiar. Growth is uncomfortable, yes, but staying stuck in patterns that suffocate your spirit is far more painful. There's power in walking away quietly, not out of spite, not out of anger, but because you finally realize you don't owe your peace to anyone who treats it like a burden. You've stopped being emotionally available to people who refuse to be accountable. That's maturity, that's self-love, and most of all, that's freedom. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real, the kind that wraps around you in the dark and reminds you, you are enough, even when they don't understand you. You are not cold, you are clear, you are not distant, you are discerning, you are not difficult, you are done. Done explaining, done defending, done offering explanations to those who listen only to twist. Now, you listen to yourself. You protect your energy. You preserve your peace. That is your new standard. And anyone who cannot meet you there was never meant to follow you into this next chapter. Let them go. Let the noise fade. Let the silence grow louder than their confusion. Because in that silence, your soul is speaking. And finally, you're listening. You owe no one access to the parts of you they only show up to damage. Just because someone knew you during your silent years doesn't mean they're entitled to your voice now. Healing creates separation. Not because you want distance, but because your vibration no longer matches what you once tolerated. And when that shift happens, it's not just people who fall away. It's patterns, mindsets, conversations, and roles you used to play just to survive. That survival mode made you shrink. It made you explain, apologize, overcompensate. But now, you're done surviving. You're learning to live. And to truly live, you must stop handing your truth to people who treat it like a weapon. There's nothing noble about staying in places that drain you just to prove your intentions. You can have the purest heart and still be destroyed by someone who thrives on confusion. You can mean well and still be exhausted by trying to explain your soul to those who are committed to misunderstanding it. Not everyone wants peace. Not everyone wants clarity. Some people need conflict to feel alive. They need drama to feel control. And when you stop feeding into it, they'll say you changed. They're right, you did. You outgrew the game. You got tired of bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. The silence you've chosen is not a retreat. It's a declaration. You're no longer asking people to respect you. You're only allowing in those who already do. You're no longer explaining why you've changed. You're embodying the change. You're no longer defending your boundaries. You're enforcing them silently, consistently, without drama or apology. And that energy, quiet, firm, rooted, will intimidate those who counted on your weakness. But your job was never to make them comfortable. Your job is to protect your alignment, your peace, your growth. And that often requires walking away from anyone who feels entitled to the old version of you. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not heartless. You're healed. You're not distant. You're discerning. There is a difference between being kind and being accessible, between being loving and being available for disrespect. You've learned the difference now, and it's changing everything. Your energy is no longer a currency they can steal. Your presence is no longer a gift they can misuse. You've returned to yourself. And from here forward, everything you give will be intentional, rooted, sovereign. Let them wonder. Let them tell their version. Let them spin confusion to mask the truth of their own behavior. You don't need to correct it. You don't need to clear your name in rooms you've outgrown. Silence is your clarity now. Stillness is your answer. And peace is your reward. You've learned to hold your ground without raising your voice. That's power. That's transformation. That's what it means to finally stop explaining yourself to demons hiding inside people who are never willing to love you whole. Not everyone deserves to witness your transformation. Not everyone has earned front row access to the version of you that rose from silence, from fire, from years of internal battles no one ever saw. And the moment you realize that, something inside you hardens, not into bitterness, but into truth. The truth that not all connections are sacred, that not all love is healthy, that some people were only comfortable when you were broken, confused, easy to manipulate. They praised your humility while feeding off your insecurity. They admired your patience while testing your limits. But now that you've returned to yourself, their praise has turned into criticism, their comfort into discomfort. Not because you've become less, but because you've stopped handing over pieces of yourself just to keep them from leaving. You can feel it in your body when someone no longer belongs in your life. You feel the drain before the words are spoken. You feel the anxiety rise when their name appears. That's not fear, it's truth knocking. Your nervous system knows what your mind keeps trying to justify. You keep giving them the benefit of the doubt while sacrificing your own peace. You keep making room in your life for people who would never do the same for you. But you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. You can't find clarity in the presence of chaos. You can't reach peace while staying connected to those who thrive on confusion. This is the shift. When you stop explaining, you stop leaking energy. You stop watering dead soil. You stop wasting breath on people who only listen to twist, deflect, and dismiss. And in that silence, you begin to hear something else. Your intuition. Your real voice. The voice that's been buried beneath years of noise, guilt, and obligation. That voice is calm, but firm. Gentle, but unshakable. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't defend. It simply speaks truth, and then allows others to choose how they meet it. Some will walk away. Let them. Some will slander your name to justify their own dysfunction. Let them. Some will act confused, hurt, betrayed by your growth. Let them. You're not responsible for their reactions. You're responsible for your peace. You're responsible for your healing. You're responsible for showing up for the version of you that had to carry it all alone. You owe that person protection now. You owe them boundaries. You owe them freedom from needing to constantly explain themselves to people who made them feel small. Every time you hold your silence instead of defending your soul, you teach yourself self-trust. Every time you walk away without argument, you choose self-worth. Every time you refuse to entertain chaos, you affirm your healing. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You just need to stop giving access to people who only understand how to cause harm. That is how you rise. That is how you reclaim your power, quietly, fully, without needing anyone's permission. You don't need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. That is not your battle. That is not your calling. The more you grow, the more you'll be misread by those who only saw value in your dysfunction. They were comfortable when you were constantly explaining, constantly second-guessing, constantly bending yourself into shapes that made them feel big. But now, you've remembered who you are. And remembering doesn't require their approval. It requires your decision to stop watering dead gardens and expecting life to bloom. You've lived long enough in apology. Apologizing for your strength. Apologizing for your silence. Apologizing for choosing peace over drama, truth over comfort, and self-respect over belonging to places that poisoned your soul. Every time you justified your intuition to someone who never listened, you chipped away at your own voice. Every time you explained your boundaries to someone who only wanted to cross them, you betrayed the part of you that was trying to rise. But now that you've stopped, now that you've stepped back, you can feel the difference. That weight was never yours to carry. That guilt wasn't yours to hold. And those expectations were never built for your healing, only your control. You are not cold for choosing distance. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for closing doors that only open to let in pain. When you stop explaining, you stop asking people to see your heart through their broken lenses. And in that silence, you stop being reactive and start becoming intentional. You stop trying to prove your worth and start embodying it. You stop hoping someone will finally understand, and instead you understand yourself, fully, without shame, without needing permission. There's a sacred power in being misunderstood by the wrong people. It sets you free. Because once you accept that not everyone can meet you where you're going, you release the need to slow your steps just to make them comfortable. You stop shrinking. You stop editing your truth. You stop overthinking every word, every choice, every boundary. You just move. You just rise. You just become. And that becoming requires space. Space to grow. Space to be. Space where your soul is not constantly under attack for simply existing. You don't have to win arguments to have peace. You don't have to justify your evolution to people who benefited from your confusion. You don't need to stay soft for those who only ever pressed you to break. Your softness is still there. It's just protected now. Guarded. Held sacred. Not everyone gets to touch it. Not everyone gets to see it. Only those who walk with honesty, with clarity, with respect for your spirit. Everyone else must stay outside the gate. You've earned the right to choose who enters your peace, and you no longer open that door with explanations. You open it with energy. And energy never lies. You are not here to play small so others feel big. You are not here to dim your light to soothe the eyes of those afraid to see clearly. You were never meant to carry the weight of other people's projections, insecurities, or unhealed wounds. Yet for so long you did. You confused tolerance with love, endurance with loyalty, and silence with peace. But now you know. Real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. Real peace doesn't ask you to betray your own soul. And real loyalty begins with you. When you stop explaining yourself to those who manipulate, diminish, or mock your truth, you reclaim the most sacred thing you've ever owned, your energy. You take it back from the places it was drained. You collect every piece of yourself left behind in conversations that never saw you. You rise from every room where you had to shrink to be accepted, and as you gather yourself, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop reaching for people who make you question your worth. You stop needing confirmation from those who never valued your presence. You start walking like someone who remembers who they are, and that remembrance is powerful. It anchors you in truth. It moves you out of reaction and into intention. It creates a life where your peace is protected, your soul is prioritized, and your love is no longer wasted on those who only came to take. You become unavailable to manipulation, unreachable to chaos, unshakable in your purpose. Because once you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving others the tools to undo you. You stop handing over your voice to those who only ever used it against you. You are not obligated to fix what you didn't break. You are not responsible for how others choose to receive your growth. You are only responsible for staying rooted in what aligns with your highest self. That means saying no without guilt. That means walking away without anger. That means loving yourself enough to stop returning to what harms you, even when it's familiar. Especially when it's familiar. This is the kind of power they don't teach. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need applause or approval. The kind that chooses peace over performance, alignment over acceptance, the kind that walks away without needing to be understood. Because when you truly understand yourself, you don't chase understanding from others. You don't try to convince them. You don't beg them to see your heart. You let them sit with the version of you they chose to misunderstand, while you become someone they'll never again have access to. You're not here to argue your worth. You're not here to perform for validation. You're here to live, to grow, to heal, to rise. You're here to protect your soul with the same intensity you once gave to pleasing others. And now you're doing just that, fully, fiercely, and without explanation. You're finally beginning to see that your peace is not a gift you give to others. It's a decision you make for yourself. And in making that decision, you let go of the chains that kept you explaining, defending, apologizing. You no longer try to win over the ones who only listen to twist your truth. You no longer try to educate the ones who choose ignorance because it helps them stay in control. You've outgrown the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You're not here to be digestible to everyone. You're here to be real. The moment you stop needing their validation, you free yourself from a prison you never deserved to be in. You realize that silence can be strength, that walking away is not weakness, that protecting your energy is not selfishness, it's survival. Because every time you poured yourself out to people who only came to take, you lost a piece of yourself. Every time you allowed chaos to interrupt your clarity, you silenced your own wisdom. Every time you begged to be seen, you blurred your own reflection. But now, there is clarity. The fog has lifted. You see yourself not through the lens of others' projections, but through your own knowing. And that knowing is loud now. It tells you who to trust, what to walk away from, what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It tells you that being whole is more important than being liked, that being at peace is more powerful than being right, that being grounded in truth is worth more than shallow connections built on control. You no longer argue with people who thrive on confusion. You no longer over-explain to people who've already decided you're wrong. You no longer invite debate into places where your soul needs rest. This is the shift from reaction to intention, from explaining to detachment, from trying to change others to choosing yourself. This is where healing becomes protection, where clarity becomes a boundary, where silence becomes sacred. Let them be confused, let them talk, let them call you distant, arrogant, difficult. You don't owe them comfort at the cost of your sanity. You don't owe them access just because they've known you. Growth changes the guest list. Healing clears the room, and in that empty space you find something beautiful, peace without performance, strength without struggle, love without explanation. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to embody it. You are not here to stay where your soul is shrinking. You are here to rise where your spirit can breathe. You've spent enough of your life lowering your volume to make others comfortable. Now it's time to be heard, even if only by yourself. No defense, no performance, no apology. Just truth, presence, and the kind of peace that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. You don't need their permission to live free. You don't need their support to be whole. You don't need their understanding to stand in your power. Every time you thought you did, it was the wound speaking, not the truth. And now that you've stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped begging for them to see your light, you've made room for something greater. You've made room for stillness. You've made room for peace. You've made room for the voice inside you that always knew the way but was drowned out by noise you never needed to hear in the first place. You've been carrying a weight that never belonged to you. Their guilt, their shame, their fear of your growth. None of that was ever yours. But when you were still trying to be accepted, still trying to be enough, you made yourself responsible for emotions they refused to own. You became the fixer, the explainer, the forgiver. You swallowed your truth to keep the peace, but all it did was break your spirit. And now, you've had enough. Now you're done negotiating with the parts of you that scream for freedom. You're done sacrificing your joy for people who only thrive when you suffer in silence. You are not too much. You are not too honest. You are not too strong. You are exactly who you need to be for where you are going. The ones who made you feel like you had to tone it down were never meant to walk beside you. They only loved you when you were broken enough to stay. But you're not broken anymore. You're healing. You're rising. You're finally listening to the sound of your own soul. And it is louder than the doubt, deeper than the fear, and stronger than every lie they ever fed you. Let them sit with their discomfort. Let them feel what they tried to project onto you. You are not responsible for what they refuse to face. You are only responsible for choosing your truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others. Choosing your truth means walking in alignment. It means honoring your boundaries without guilt. It means loving yourself without asking for permission. It means becoming unavailable to anything that drains you, belittles you, or asks you to betray yourself for a false sense of belonging. You're not hard to love. You were just loving people who only knew how to consume, not connect. You're not distant. You've just built walls where there used to be doors, because not everyone deserves access. You're not cold. You're clear. And clarity is what keeps you safe now. Not fear. Not doubt. Not guilt. Just clarity. And in that clarity, you breathe differently. You speak differently. You move with purpose, not panic. You live with peace, not permission. And you love not from a place of lack, but from a place of overflow. Because you've remembered the truth, you never had to explain yourself to be worthy. You just had to stop forgetting it. Every time you stood in front of someone who couldn't see your heart and tried to make them understand it, you abandoned a part of yourself. You handed over pieces of your identity, hoping they would hold them gently. But instead, they twisted your truth to feed their own emptiness. You cannot explain your light to those addicted to darkness. You cannot soften yourself enough to fit inside the limits of their fear. And now you're waking up, not gently, not slowly, but fully. You're waking up to the truth that you are not here to be made small, not here to be molded, not here to be approved. You're here to live in alignment, and Alignment doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't shrink for comfort. It stands rooted. It knows. It sees clearly. And when you begin to live in alignment, you stop participating in conversations that dishonor your spirit. You stop responding to attacks disguised as concern. You stop defending yourself to people who were never listening anyway. You realize that no amount of explanation will reach someone who's only committed to misunderstanding you. This kind of awareness changes everything. It doesn't just protect your energy. It reclaims your voice. It repairs your mind. It restores your power. You stop asking people to meet you where they have no intention of going. You stop wasting breath on those who turned your pain into entertainment. You stop performing wholeness for people who only liked you when you were broken. And in that stillness, something sacred happens. You meet yourself again. Not the edited version, not the filtered one, the real you, the one who always knew, the one who was always enough. You don't need louder opinions. You need deeper silence. You don't need more approval. You need stronger boundaries. You don't need to explain your soul. You need to protect it. Because not everyone you lose is a loss. Sometimes it's a rescue. Sometimes it's the universe removing the noise so you can finally hear your own truth without interruption. And in that truth, there is no confusion. You see clearly now that peace is not found in convincing others. It's found in releasing them, releasing their expectations, releasing their projections, releasing the need to be understood by those who choose ignorance over intimacy. You are not who they said you were. You never were. And the moment you stop explaining, you begin expanding. You stretch into your full capacity. You breathe without hesitation. You move without guilt. You live without fear of who might leave, because now you know. What walks away when you stop apologizing was never love. It was control. It was attachment. It was fear dressed up as connection. And now that it's gone, you have room to rise, room to heal, room to become. No defense, no explanation. Just truth, rising in silence, speaking louder than words ever could. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop betraying yourself. You stop editing your voice just to be heard by people who were never listening. You stop twisting your truth to fit a version of yourself they prefer. That's not growth. That's imprisonment. That's the slow death of your spirit under the weight of approval addiction. And you were never born for that. You were born to be whole, not to be liked. You were born to be true, not to be palatable. You were born to be light, not to dim for comfort. Every second you spent over-explaining was a silent apology for your existence, for being too honest, too intense, too awake, too alive. You kept trying to shape yourself into something easier to accept, but the cost was too high. The more you gave them your reasons, your intentions, your proof of goodness, the more they fed off your insecurity. Because it was never about clarity. It was about control. They never needed to understand you. They needed you to doubt yourself. Because your self-doubt gave them power. But the moment you stop justifying, something shifts. You no longer sit in rooms where your soul goes quiet. You no longer keep conversations alive that kill your spirit. You no longer ask, did I say it wrong? When the truth is you simply spoke from a place they refused to reach. And now, silence becomes your armor. Not coldness, not distance, but clarity. That calm, grounded stillness that says, I don't owe you an explanation for who I've become. Healing is not loud. It's not performative. It's quiet. It's steady. It's choosing to walk away from what diminishes your peace without needing to announce your worth on the way out. You let go, not because they were right, but because you are finally choosing yourself over the illusion of being chosen. And in that decision you find the freedom you kept begging others to give you. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need to be flawless to deserve respect. You only need to stand rooted in the truth that your value doesn't fluctuate based on who can see it. The right people won't need a presentation to believe in you. They'll feel your energy. They'll hear your heart. They'll meet your soul without forcing it into a mold. And until those people arrive, you walk alone. Not lonely, but whole. Stop waiting for their permission to be at peace. Stop explaining your softness to those who weaponize it. Stop handing your light to people who curse the sun and blame it for burning. You're allowed to outgrow the rooms you once begged to be in. You're allowed to leave behind those who made you question your worth. You're allowed to be done. No apology. No closure. No more shrinking to make others feel tall. Just breath. Just presence. Just truth. Alive. Unapologetic. Whole. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to embody it. To wear it like skin, not like armor. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your energy from every place it was wasted trying to earn validation that never came. You begin to see that your truth was never too much. It was just too real for those committed to illusion. And once you see that, there's no going back. There's no pretending to be small when you've tasted your own power. There's no shrinking into roles that suffocate your voice. There's no performing peace when your soul is aching for freedom. You weren't wrong for being different. You weren't wrong for wanting more. You weren't wrong for holding standards that others weren't ready to rise to. What was wrong was how you silenced yourself to make others comfortable with their limitations. What was wrong was how you let their projections define your potential. But that ends now, because the truth is, the moment you stop trying to prove yourself to people who don't value growth, you create space for transformation, real transformation, the kind that doesn't need applause, only alignment. There is nothing more dangerous to the world's illusions than a person who knows who they are. Nothing more powerful than someone who no longer explains away their light to soothe someone else's shadow. You don't need to justify your healing. You don't need to apologize for your boundaries. You don't need to defend your joy, your peace, or your decision to walk away from what broke you. That isn't arrogance, that's self-respect. And the deeper your self-respect runs, the less you'll feel the need to be understood by those who never truly saw you to begin with. Your evolution won't always be loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that says, "I'm done." Sometimes it's a quiet refusal to answer the same questions that drain your spirit. Sometimes it's a silent goodbye with no explanation, no dramatic exit, no emotional presentation. Just a firm decision to no longer bleed for people who cut you and then demanded a reason for your pain. Let them misunderstand you. Let them label you. Let them spin stories that fit their narrative. You are not here to fix their lens. You are here to protect your clarity. What you're building now is sacred. A life built not on fear or obligation, but on alignment and intention. A reality where your energy is no longer currency for people who can't afford your depth. You don't owe anyone the version of you that made them feel superior. You owe yourself the version of you that finally feels free. Let that be enough. Let that be everything. The peace you've been chasing is waiting in the space where explanations end and truth begins. Step into it without hesitation. Stand in it without guilt. Stay in it without compromise. You have nothing left to prove, only everything left to claim. You were never meant to explain your worth to anyone. You were meant to know it, to walk with it, to move through the world as if your presence is a fact, not a question. When you begin living from that truth, your energy shifts. You stop chasing approval and start attracting alignment. You stop negotiating with people who only valued you when you were uncertain. And you stop offering pieces of your soul in exchange for being temporarily seen by people who were never truly looking. The moment you decide that your truth is enough, even if no one claps, even if no one agrees, even if no one understands, you become unshakable. That's not ego. That's freedom. Because the truth is, most people don't want your clarity. They want your confusion. They don't want your strength. They want your compliance. Not because they're powerful, but because they're afraid. Afraid of what it would mean to face someone who no longer needs their approval to feel whole. Afraid of the mirror your growth holds up to their refusal to change. This is why you must be fierce with your energy. Not aggressive, but intentional. Not cold, but clear. You don't owe people your time just because they demand it. You don't owe them your explanations just because they question your path. Silence, when grounded in self-respect, is a boundary. And boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. Doors that close to what harms you and open to what honors you. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop inviting people into rooms they've only ever trashed. You don't need to soften your fire to be accepted. You don't need to dilute your dreams to be digestible. You don't need to shrink your soul to be tolerated. That's a lie you were taught by people who feared what they didn't understand. But you are not here to make others comfortable. You're here to rise. You're here to break cycles, not blend into them. You're here to become the version of yourself you used to silence just to fit in. Let go of the urge to be understood. You don't need it. What you need is peace. What you need is purpose. What you need is alignment with your own truth, even if that means walking alone. Because walking alone in truth is more powerful than being surrounded in lies. You were not made to be everyone's version of enough. You were made to be whole, even when others cannot see the value in your wholeness. Choose the path of least explanation, not out of bitterness but out of self-trust. You don't owe them your story. You don't owe them your process. You only owe yourself the commitment to never again abandon your own voice just to be heard by people who never listened. Stand firm in your becoming. Be louder in your silence. Be bold in your presence. Because when you stop explaining, you start living, fully, finally, freely. When you stop explaining yourself, you take your power back. Every moment you once spent defending your worth, you reclaim for your healing. Every breath wasted proving your intentions, you now breathe into purpose. You no longer perform for people who can't even see the stage you're standing on. You stop offering clarity to those who twist your words to serve their confusion. You begin to realize that silence, when rooted in strength, is not weakness. It is mastery. It is wisdom. It is peace choosing itself over chaos that wears a friendly face. There is a deep kind of freedom that only comes when you stop trying to be digestible to people who were never meant to hold your truth. The more you align with your inner compass, the less you need directions from those who are lost in themselves. Their judgment no longer reaches you. Their projections no longer define you. Because the version of you that needed their validation no longer exists. You've outgrown the version of yourself that shrank just to make others feel tall. That chapter is closed. That role is retired. Growth has a cost, and one of the first payments is silence. Silence from people who once celebrated you when you were convenient. Distance from those who only valued you when you didn't value yourself. You will be misunderstood. You will be talked about. You will be labeled difficult, ungrateful, even arrogant. Not because you are any of those things, but because your clarity disrupts their illusion of control. Because your boundaries threaten their comfort in your old patterns. Because your truth calls out the lies they've been living in. Do not be afraid of being seen as too much. Be afraid of staying small just to please people who benefit from your silence. Be afraid of betraying your own growth just to make those around you feel safe in their stagnation. You were not born to beg for respect. You were born to embody it, to move with it, to become a living standard for what self-worth looks like in motion. And when you carry yourself like someone who knows they don't need to explain their choices, the world responds. It may push back at first, but eventually, it respects what doesn't flinch. Your peace is not up for debate. Your growth is not up for negotiation. You do not exist to keep others comfortable at the expense of your own evolution. You are not here to shrink. You are here to become. You are here to rise. You are here to step fully into the kind of self-respect that no longer asks for permission to be at peace. The ones who get it won't need an explanation. The ones who don't were never listening to begin with. Let them misunderstand. Let them guess. Let them talk. But don't let them pull you back into the version of you who once needed their approval. That version is gone. And the one replacing it needs no defense, only direction.